Alright guys, welcome back to another one. So we just recently heard about something interesting, though not totally surprising, coming from Square Enix in relation to Final Fantasy Tactics. As we know, the remaster is set to release later on this year, and recently, the game's director Kazutoyo Mehiro was interviewed about the game. He dropped some pretty big news here, confirming that the original source code for Final Fantasy Tactics had in fact been lost. This was the biggest challenge that the development team faced when creating the Ivalice Chronicles, as it meant that the team had to reverse engineer a retail copy of the game and having to create certain systems and assets from scratch again. This is most likely why it's taken so long to see a remaster of Final Fantasy Tactics. He mentioned here there were a number of major challenges, but all of them stemmed from the fact that the master data and source code from the original game no longer existed. This isn't to say that they were mishandled or poorly managed or anything like that. Keeping that kind of data wasn't a normal thing to do at the time. In those days, we didn't have the sort of robust resource management tools that exist today, and on top of that, the production workflow for the game was such that the Japanese version was produced first, then we would create localized versions by overriding that data with that of other languages, including English. There was also no such thing as online patches or updates, so unless there was any major reason to do something different once you made the game, that was it. He was asked how the team solved this problem, and he said, put simply, by sheer force. We analyzed a number of existing versions of the game and reconstructed the programming of the original, but there were also times where we played the original game and worked it out by just feel alone. The entire process was the result of cumulative hard work. On the one hand, working to implement new features, while behind the scenes our work was similar to porting an old arcade game to the NES. Remastering an old video game is usually a straightforward process so long as the developer has the original data. But in a situation like this, where that original data wasn't preserved, it makes that entire process a lot more strenuous. Like Mehiro mentioned here though, back in the 90s and throughout the early 2000s, it wasn't really commonplace for devs to hold on to the master data of a game. The concept of remasters didn't start to become a thing until about the 2010s. Because remasters started to popularize, and now with online capabilities of being able to apply patches and updates, it sort of gave devs a reason to hold on to that original data. The lost source code situation though isn't exactly new territory for Square Enix. Back in 2019, the CEO of Square, Yosuke Matsuda, admitted that the company is no longer in possession of the source code of a large amount of Square's older game catalog. He said here, I'm embarrassed to admit it, but in some cases we don't know where the code is anymore. It's very hard to find them sometimes because back in the day you just made them and put them out there and you were done. You didn't think of how you were going to sell them down the road. Sometimes customers ask, why haven't you released that game yet? And the truth of the matter is, it's because we don't know where it's gone. Now, the context of this interview between Game Informer and Matsuda is how Square had an initiative to bring a lot of their older catalog into modern times to make them more readily available. And this is something that Square focused on hard throughout the 2010s. However, there's still a large amount of older Square Enix titles that fans have been asking to receive a remaster that still haven't. For the likes of something like Chrono Trigger or Parasite Eve, these are two examples of games that aren't available on modern systems. And the reason why is most likely because Square Enix are no longer in possession of those games' original source code. Chrono Trigger did receive a port to both Steam and mobile, but fans have been desperately requesting a proper remaster, especially on consoles, for quite a while now. This is why we sometimes see studios opting for emulation rather than trying to reverse engineer the original game based on a retail copy. Though this doesn't come with all the benefits of a native remaster, it still provides the user to be able to play these older titles on modern systems with a slight resolution increase. There's actually another Square Enix game that's been confirmed to have lost its source code, and that is Kingdom Hearts 1. In 2013, Tetsuya Nomura was involved in an interview talking about 1.5 HD Remix, where he confirmed at E3 that the original source code of Kingdom Hearts 1 had been lost.
思った以上に時間のかかる作業でした。
So, the Kingdom Hearts 1 was created long time ago. So actually the original data was missing already, was lost. So we had to research and we had to dig out from the actual games available and recreate everything for HD.
Wow.
Yeah, so and then we had to recreate graphics, and it was actually not that easy.
Like he explained here, this made the process of making 1.5 incredibly difficult for the team, recreating a lot of the assets from scratch. This is why when we're looking at comparisons between that original PlayStation 2 version to 1.5, there are some pretty significant differences if we're looking at a lot of the textures and character models. Now, Square Enix obviously would have dumped that original game and would have ripped a lot of the assets from the original to repurpose for 1.5, but I still think it's pretty impressive that they went through the process of having to start from scratch in many different instances to provide an authentic feeling experience. If a person didn't know that the original source code of the game had been lost, they would honestly be none the wiser. Final Fantasy Tactics and Kingdom Hearts 1 are the only two situations where it's confirmed that the original data of those games have been lost. But the comment from Mitsuda confirms to us that there are many other older Square Enix games where that original data no longer exists. For the likes of Vagrant Story, Dirge of Cerberus, The Bouncer, Chocobo Racing, Xenogears, Chrono Trigger, Parasite Eve 1 and 2, ActRaiser, Bahamut Lagoon, or Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, many believe that either the complete original data of these games have been lost, or at least partial amounts. Obviously, if we're looking at Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, those games have in fact received remasters, but we're unsure if those versions are based on a repurposed version of a retail copy. Now, of course, it's not just Square Enix who was subjected to this type of thing. As mentioned, it was commonplace back in the day, so many other developers also don't have source code for a lot of their older titles. Confirmed cases are Silent Hill 1 and 2, Mega Man Legends 1 and 2, Resident Evil 1, Amplitude, Blade Runner, Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, Panzer Dragoon Saga. Now, those are just a few examples that have been publicly stated to be lost, but there would be a much greater amount out there that are lost to time that aren't publicly known. So if you're still waiting for a native remaster of a game that released throughout the early 2000s, the 90s, or 80s, that still hasn't released to this day, there's a good chance that the reason why is because that source code is lost, and the process for the developers to go through and reverse engineer that original game is simply just too time consuming and would take up way too many resources. Now, looking in modern times, this isn't exactly something that we have to worry too much about. Source code is constantly preserved for the sheer reason of either re-releasing later on in many years to come, or to provide further support, patches, fixes, and enhancements. But this is a sad case for a lot of those older titles where the devs just simply don't want to bite the bullet in order to refresh them. Personally, I'm still holding out that Parasite Eve, Dirge of Cerberus, and Vagrant Story might receive some type of remaster in the future, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we never see this. At that point though, Square Enix might just look at these titles and think, yeah, maybe a remake makes a little bit more sense than just simply remastering those original experiences. However guys, that's all for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Slap that like button and subscribe to the channel. A big thank you to my wonderful patrons. I hope you're all having a fantastic day, and we'll talk again real soon.